Hello, and welcome to the second in our new Human Givens Ask the Expert podcast series. My name's Julia Wellstead, and I'm on the Human Givens team. We're running this podcast series as an opportunity for you to hear Human Givens professionals discuss mental health and emotional well-being from the point of view of their particular area of expertise. And we'll be discussing a wide range of topics over the series that we feel should be openly discussed, and those in which our listeners have expressed an interest. And it's all to help promote emotional health and clear thinking. So on this podcast, we're asking the expert why every childhood is worth fighting for. And we're delighted for this to have Chris Dyas joining us today. Chris is a social worker for the NSPCC, that's the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. And there he supports children who've been sexually abused. Now, Chris is based at the NSPCC charity Stoke-on-Trent Service Centre at Carroll House in Basford, and has completed his Human Givens Diploma and is also a registered HG practitioner. Hello, Chris. Thank you for taking the time to be part of our podcast.
You're welcome.
And congratulations on winning the Children's Social Worker of the Year in 2018, which we wrote up in our newsletter.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Now, during this podcast, we'll be discussing the importance of supporting vulnerable children and generally of encouraging child and adolescent emotional health. We've received loads of questions for you from our audience, Chris. No surprises there. And thank you to everyone who's submitted one. Now, we're going to try and answer as many as we can. And to that end, I've amalgamated some that are sort of on a similar theme. So Chris, let's get started. The very first question, which is kind of my own as well, is please could you tell us more about your social work and how and why you chose the HG approach and how that the Human Givens approach helps you in your role as a social worker. So just a very small question there.
A small question indeed. Oh, well, I started working in social care generally about 1984 as a youth worker. After finishing my degree, I went and ran a small youth club in Crewe in Cheshire for a year, and then went on to do a postgrad in youth and community work, and I did that for a while. And then family came along. I needed more money, if I'm honest, so I retrained as a social worker, qualified in 1990, and did that child protection work for about 8 years before moving to the NSPCC in 1998. Where my role kind of changed. I was still required to be a social worker, but also to be a therapist. So it was kind of an odd title, really. But at that time, we still are very conscious that to do the kind of work I'm doing, you need to have a good grounding in social work, protected practice, as well as therapeutic skills as well. Yeah. So I've been doing that for 20 years. Still working in Stoke-on-Trent, working with the young people there, and watching some of them grow up and become adults.
Yes, of course. And have their own children, probably.
Yes, one has, in fact, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And when did the Human Givens approach
come
into all of that?
Right at the very beginning, because when I first came to the NSPCC, it was under the idea that they would support me through family therapy training. Systemic therapy was very much the thing then, and I was very glad to do that. But then, unfortunately, things changed in organisations and my funding was cut. And I was very conscious that I couldn't just be a social worker and assume that made me a therapist as well. So I was looking around for a way of training that I could afford as well as was right. And fortune had it that I came across the Minefields College, as it was called then.
Yes.
And I met people like Joe and Ivan and Pat Williams and Denise at that time. Did the Minefields courses, then picked up the first monograph, and then the title Human Givens came into the world. And I've been following the development ever since.
Brilliant! That's fantastic, yeah, and it meshes into your work.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think everything. I mean, now in the last I think it's 15 years, I've lost count. I've been a trainer as well for the local Children's Safeguarding Board on behalf of the NSPCC. Human Givens is sort of permeates through all of it, and it's extremely important. People realise that in some respects, well, as one child once said to me, it's not what was done to me, it's what it's left me with. And it's constantly saying to people, you've got to look at the here and now, our needs met now, if they're not. It's like, I think one of Idris Shah's sayings is, if the sausages are gone, does it matter that the dog ate them? And I absolutely love that.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, because it's like, all right, so sometimes we get entranced by the story and not realize that we've got someone in front of us that's still very, very distressed, even though they're technically safe.
Yes, brilliant.
It's vitally important that people understand the core organising ideas of HG, even if they're not going to be therapeutic practitioners. It's a blueprint for life.
Yes, absolutely. Well said.
I should write some publicity for this organisation.
You should. Please do. Please do. Right, Chris, I've got a batch of 6 questions here, which I think you probably want to answer all at once. So I'm going to blat them out and then let you do the answering. So here we go.
Okay.
What are the signs of mental health difficulties in children? And are they the same as adults, or do they differ? Question 2, what can we do to help vulnerable children? Question 3, what can we do to help their recovery process? How should we approach children who we think are struggling with mental health difficulties? And how can we help children build confidence, self-worth, develop resilience, and sort of self-image, I suppose, so they can cope better?
Right.
There you go. Go for it.
Hey, how long have we got, by the way?
Oh, we've got all day.
Okay. Well, the difference between adults and children. Well, to be fair, again, I'm talking from personal experience, but I think so if it comes to things like anxiety, I suppose children have more things in front of them to be anxious about, and adults have more things behind them to ruminate over. Children are very much in the here and now, and if they don't feel safe in the here and now, it's impossible to talk about the past. They're not going to do that.
Yes, or the future, presumably.
Or the future, yeah. It's very much now. And I know that one young person, again, the one who gave that sentence, is people say, I should come and talk about this. I don't want to talk about it. I want to forget it. And I said, can you forget it? And she said, no, I can't. And I said, well, do you want me to help you to forget it? Or put it somewhere where it doesn't bother you? And that was our agreement. We worked on that. Yeah. And I think the ability to forget is a vital human given. Otherwise, our heads would explode, wouldn't they?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's, personally, I just, every human being's different. You have to do, children will express their anxieties different to adults, but they'll feel fear just the same way. Children can be depressed. In fact, my own personal experience as a child was I was depressed for a period of time. People didn't pick it up because people didn't think it was possible then.
No, so we sort of didn't know the word, did we? I don't remember knowing the word.
There wasn't describing it, that's true. There's lots of things in my life I didn't realise were there until someone gave me a vocabulary.
Yes.
And I could see it. I mean, Human Givens shows us that we all have fundamental emotional needs. Things go wrong when these needs are unmet or frustrated, whether you're an adult or you're a child. The difficulties, and I think sometimes we misinterpret children, that we see a difficulty like a behaviour or a way they're speaking, and we assume that's the problem. Whereas for the child, that's their attempt at a solution. That's their coping strategy. Exactly. And so we start treating solutions rather than looking for an underlying unmet need. When if it is met, the problem evaporates because it isn't needed anymore. So looking at what can we do to help the recovery process. And again, I just think that we're missing something. Maybe, I mean, other people are saying this, but we've created a toxic culture for children. I was talking to some youngsters who they were being asked what advice they would give to the government about how children could keep themselves safe on the internet. And one bright spark said, all the problems children have with the internet were created by adults. So it's up to the adults to effing solve it. I thought, you're right. You know, why have you made something so dangerous and then tell children to be careful with it? We wouldn't do that with knives, would we? No. Or guns. No. So no. A lot of this is about adults, the adult world taking responsibility for the overall welfare of children and not bagging them off to therapists when things go wrong. You
Yes.
cannot, or as a friend of mine said once, you can't inoculate a child against crap life syndrome. And I think that's very true.
Okay.
And I think, yes, the vast majority of so-called mental health problems, and I'm saying so-called, are caused by adults.
Yeah.
And they're caused by other children. Mental health difficulties are other people and what they do. And we mustn't get suckered into trying to inoculate distressed children from unhealthy home or school environments. Children need to feel safe, loved. They need to feel that they're welcome and valuable members of communities, groups, families. They have to be in place. Otherwise, no amount of therapy will work. Because it just won't. Because the need will stay unmet. Yes. So we have to think wider than that. Was it the old Pat Williams used to say all the time? It takes a village to raise a child. Which is lovely, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Am I answering the questions?
Yes, absolutely. The question in my head there, I suppose, is so when you have a child in front of you who's struggling, you presumably therefore are looking at the home environment, the school environment.
Yeah, we look at the whole thing. You have to. The word holistic is truly part of what we do, and part of the job sometimes is going back to families and other professionals and saying, "You're asking me to do something I can't do because you've got to do something." And sometimes they don't want to hear that, and other times they kind of wake up and go, "Oh, really?" And then when you explain it, they go, "Oh, I see what you mean." Yeah. Yes. So, and like said, like children when there's been sexual abuse, well, are they having contact with the person who they've alleged? And well, forget it. There's no way that child's going to be calm enough to do therapy. They're going to be living in a constant state of fight or flight. They're not safe. You've got to be safe first. That's the wonderful contribution that Stephen Porges is making through polyvagal theory. He's actually showing that the entire nervous system is geared towards finding safety. And once it gets the safety signal, then it comes to the point at which things can be discussed. And I think a lot of times we're trying to get children to discuss things, but when their whole body is screaming for safety.
Yes.
And they're not hearing. They're not,
as we're taught through HG, they're not able to hear or respond. Exactly. Yes, absolutely. So, Chris, I know from our previous chat for the newsletter that you've developed something called single opportunity counselling. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
This has been great fun. This all started about 18 months ago with, again, talking to a group of young people who are our participation group. And they were talking about how long they had been waiting for counselling services after having diagnoses such as depression or anxiety following their abuse experiences. And one young man had been waiting for the best part of 2 years. And I appreciate that this is not me bashing the CAM service. They are really, really up against it. And goodness knows how they're doing their job. But he made the comment, I wish there'd been someone to talk to while I was waiting for someone to talk to. And I thought, that hit me like a bit of a gong. I went, why you're surrounded by people? Surely, to goodness, there was someone you could have talked to. What is it about that? It's like people backing off you, with people not feeling confident. People didn't want to tread on the professional's toes. You're seeing an expert. I couldn't possibly. And then it kind of set off a chain of thought in my head because over the years I've done lots of other things like first aid training and things. And I can remember my father, who was a first aid trainer, telling me that first aid training took a giant leap forward when they stopped allowing doctors to teach it.
Yes. Yes. Well, as a nurse, I absolutely understand that one. Yes.
Because they overcomplicated it and they put in lots of facts that doctors enjoy, but people would just confuse people in the street. If you're dealing with someone, you don't have to know the hemoglobin content of blood to know that too much is pouring out and you've got to stop it.
Yes.
So it then made me think, well, of all the things that I've learned as a therapist, what are the most common tools, if you like, I use more than anything else? And what's the minimum you would need to know to have the maximum impact for the most common conversations that a distressed child might come to you? And that's really the key word for SOC, single opportunity counselling, is forget the whole world mental health problem. Just stop thinking that. Think distressed child. And it puts your head in another question. Because if you say, this child has a mental health problem, you go, ooh, what is it? Whereas if you say, this child is distressed, you ask, what about?
Yeah.
So it puts your head in a different, it actually inspires a sense of responsibility in yourself to do something rather than fob the child off to someone else. So I was thinking, so I put together what I thought was an acceptable toolkit using core HG principles. But then I thought, well, given the fact that I would only ever have a one-day chance to teach people, how do I teach folks in a day to do that? So then I had a lot of thinking and using lots of techniques and ways of doing stuff that I'd learned off other people over the years. Put together a little flyer. I pitched it to the local safeguarding training board, and thankfully, because they trust me as a trainer, they said, all right, give it a go. We'll do a pilot. So we advertised it, and I was told it sold out in half a day. Yeah. Which I thought, well, sell out as it fully booked up with a big waiting list. So we're going, oh well, no, this is charming for people. So we put on 2 more to take up the all the numbers who were on the waiting list, and then it just started to snowball. And 2 of my colleagues have come in now, and they just presented their first one without me being there, which was nerve-wracking for all of us.
Yes.
But
how did it go?
In the space of 1 year, we have now, we had to limit it to Stoke-on-Trent. Couldn't take it out of Stoke because it is an NSPCC project, and they're very keen that it be properly quality assured and evaluated, which we're in the process of doing. But we've taken 350 people through it.
Wow!
In 12 months, just through word of mouth. So that's
astonishing.
That's representing 85 agencies, including 35 schools, and we are booked up till. We're fully booked till May. We're going to be training probably all the local police, community support officers, vulnerabilities teams, foster carers, family support workers. They're all booked in for a number of more schools. The people who used to be called Sure Start are called something else now. I can't remember the name of it. And I've also, believe it or not, I was with a young person who was quite suicidal 2 weeks ago. And thankfully, because I'd been practicing SOC for quite a while, I wasn't ambushed by it, and I took her through a technique called Chase One Rabbit, which people will find out about in the end. And it got her from being completely adamant she was going to die through to, okay, I'll give you a chance. Wow. And I took her to hospital. We were in the ambulance chatting to the paramedic about the conversation we'd had. And then after all, hopefully now she's safe. But then the following week, the guy knocked on the door at the NSPCC and came in, and this is the paramedic, and said, could you teach us how to do that?
Ah, brilliant.
So hopefully... So
that's there on the list as well.
Hopefully the paramedics are going to have a go. And the idea is it possible to get to a point just through this very practitioner-to-practitioner conversation without management structures and bureaucracies being involved, that we could actually cause a bit of a mini revolution with it, that every child in the city in the end in 1 or 2 years will know someone that can do SOC.
Yes.
And what difference that make to the overall mental health community of the city, I don't know. It's really exciting.
Yes. And back to the child who said, I wish I could talk to someone while I'm waiting to talk to someone. Hopefully that will remove that waiting. Because there's always going to be someone for them to talk to. Yes,
that's right.
That's the idea.
And the thing about this is that a lot of times I'm over the years I've learned many assessment systems, and I'm supposed to assess children, assess their needs, assess their situations. And it's dawned on me for quite a while that there are 2 assessments. That's a very important assessment that you make of the child's therapeutic needs. But the more important one is the assessment the child makes of you.
Yeah,
that will decide whether or not your therapy is going to work. They are sussing you out, and if you don't come across as someone that knows what they're talking about, is trustworthy, and will give them attention, then you'll forget it. They won't even come near. So if a kid does say, "Excuse me, sir, excuse me, miss, can I have a chat with you?" You've passed a very important assessment already.
Yeah,
and then at that point, it's what you do next that will either make or break it.
Exactly. That's when you have to not say, well, just wait till tomorrow or something, but actually get stuck in.
Yeah.
Yes.
We one of the questions is, how do we help children cope better? And I think, slow the bloody world down.
Yes. Not be
There's a
so
few things
busy.
I got, a few controversial things I got here about how we can make things, how we can reverse the trend, but it won't be through therapy.
No. So, Chris, back to some of these questions.
Sure.
Do different techniques need to be used on children on the Asperger's or autism spectrum from those who are what we might call neurotypical? There's a question for you.
Okay, so, well, when I read the question, I thought, well, first of all, using a technique on someone sounds like you're doing karate. For me, therapy is something you do with someone, and not something that you do to them. And I've known lots of young people with Asperger's and things like that, and everybody's different. So to say, but there are things that are different about the way folks on the spectrum think. They're different. They're not better or worse. It's just different, and it's about me taking the trouble to understand them. I read a book by a young man who described the spectrum like one of the old-fashioned graphic equalizers you used to get on big stereo systems. Lots of little sliders going up and down, and every single person has a different shape as to where these sliders go up and down. You have to know where all these different things are. You can't put them in a box and say, that's Asperger, that's not.
That's a brilliant image, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, so it's about, first of all, getting to know that person, and that's not too difficult. What do you want? What would a good life for you be like? What troubles you? What's stopping you getting the life you want? Do we need to ask other people to help? What do you think you're missing? Those are questions that could be asked quite legitimately, and then you fit the therapy to the child, not the child to the therapy.
Yes. Do you treat anxiety in children the same way as in adults?
I suppose, again, the question is, what are they anxious about?
Yes. So, the answer is yes, isn't it? You work out where they're coming from and what they're...
Exactly. And they have different ways of expressing that. And I have all sorts of very lovely worksheets and colourful charts and card sets and lots of playful things to get the information, because some children don't necessarily have a very good vocabulary for describing emotions. So if you pardon the language, we do have a solution-focused scale thing called the shitometer. How shit is it at the moment? And they can generally put themselves on this somewhere, whereas they may not be able to tell you exactly how using complicated adult language, but you get a general idea of how dischussed they are.
Yes.
And there's a big difference between anxiety and fear. And a lot of children, not necessarily anxious, they're in fear. There are real threats to their world. There are people roaming around on bail conditions, whatever they are, who are threatened to kill them. Yeah. And can you legitimately take that away from them, where actually it might be part of their survival system of staying alive? So we have to be careful that we don't assume that the child, again, is safe in the way that an adult might. A lot of adults will say, I know I shouldn't be afraid of this, but sometimes children don't know that at all. And it's about being gentle and, again, find out. Take the time, get to know
what
people.
It is, yes.
What is it? Yeah. Who's serving who? I think that's always an important question for adults.
Yes.
We talk about teams around the child. I think teams for the child.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. And do you find there's a question here? How can we teach or help boys to speak about their feelings? Now, do you actually find that boys find that harder than girls, or is that a
they do it in a different way to girls. Again, it's probably controversial, but I think this, you have to ask who wants who to talk and why. Sometimes boys don't want to talk about feelings. Well, okay, why do they have to? Does it make any difference to them being able to solve problems? Just talking about something doesn't necessarily make it any better or make it go away. So, or do you talk about the situation so that your feelings about it change, in which case you feel happier, and that was great, thanks very much. But there are very definitely gender differences. I know this is. I was watching Mickey Flanagan, the comic. He was talking about gender differences, and
Yes.
he described a situation where he'd gone off to the pub and come back, and his wife says to him, "Did you see Steve?" He said, "Yeah, I saw Steve." And she says, "So how's Michelle?" He says, "What do you mean, how's Michelle?" "Well, Steve's wife, how's Michelle?" And he says, "I don't know, didn't ask him. I didn't ask Steve how Michelle was. I didn't even ask Steve how Steve was." And men can operate like that quite successfully, and it drives women mad, I know, but sometimes, but boys will express their feelings. They don't necessarily do it verbally. And I do wonder, again, it's maybe a topic for another day, that there's an evolutionary part to that, because way back in the distant past, the teenage boys would have been the hunters in a tribal life. And when you're a hunter and you're hunting with other males, the last thing you want to be making is noise. So I wonder whether...
Very good point.
I think maybe the boys are very good with non-verbals and signalling, and you can tell how they are. And you kind of wonder whether that was how they hunted, because if they're chattering away and what have you, they're going to scare the game away. So
yes,
there you go. Maybe
that's brilliant. Whereas the women's role was to know absolutely everything and have the full gamut of who's okay, who's not okay. Yeah. Where the good berry bush is for eating, all that sort of thing.
Exactly. Where are the kids? All that kind of thing.
Yes, so it's our brains are wired to know how everybody is. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Very, very good point. Yes. Now, the next question, the number of children and teens self-harming is on the increase. Do you have any experience with working with self-harmers?
Oh, yeah, quite a bit of that. Whether it's increasing or not, I don't think anybody knows. Like with suicide as well. I was listening to a podcast by Radio 4, more or less, yesterday. They were talking about suicide rates there, and someone was questioning the received wisdom about incident rates of suicide and its relationship to depression, saying that it seems to be a 50-50 now. So in a way, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Is it on the increase? Is it not? It's what do we do about it now we know about it?
Yes, it's possibly just less hidden.
Yes, like a lot of things, like sexual abuse suddenly emerged into our consciousness in the 1980s. That wasn't when it started. We know the cases are going back, oh goodness me.
Yes, well, till the start of time.
Yeah. Yes. So it's how did I thought it was interesting when sexual abuse did come into the public domain, how many experts suddenly appeared on the subject. I kind of wonder, where did they get their expertise from?
Yes.
Yeah, the person who speaks first generally tends to be called the expert.
Yep, absolutely.
But with self-harming, I think I'm only meeting self-harmers who are self-harming because of the impact that sexual abuse has had on them. So maybe I'm meeting a discrete population within a wider population. But I would say that one of the main drivers in it is learned helplessness caused by too many things going wrong. Whereas people's attention becomes locked on one problem and they ruminate over it. In this situation, the attention can't lock on anything because there's too many plates on sticks. There's too much going on, and so the mind is constantly flicking from one thing to another, and the effect of that is minor problems become big problems. Everything loses a sense of proportion. Yeah. And one of the things that we've tried to develop in SOC is a straightforward process that an adult can use to actually bring that level of confusion down, so they start to get perspective. And it's in a way, it's a challenge to the CBT idea of doing cost-benefit analysis, where if someone's feeling suicidal, you put the pros and the cons before them. My experience of trying that is a kid will very easily get into playing the yes but game with you. And whereas in SOC, we're basically saying, yeah, this sounds bloody awful. All of it sounds dreadful. I'm not going to tell you to cheer up, Chuck, because I can't see how you can. But the main thing is, I can see here that maybe there is control that you can exercise, which may make you feel better if you did that. So try to make the child happy, help them feel a sense of control again. And that tends to bring down the impulse to hurt self, because it's a compensation behavior. It's a way of feeling better. You self-harm and it switches off depression and anxiety for a period of time. Your body gets flooded with endorphins and you feel better for a bit, but you haven't solved the problem. Nothing's changed. And then we know you've added to your problems because now you feel terrible that you've hurt yourself.
By mollycoddling our children, are we fueling mental illness in teenagers? We might not like that term, but difficulties in teenagers.
Are we
mollycoddling?
Are we mollycoddling our children? I would say no, we're not. I would say we're exposing them to unprecedented dangers.
Well, or isn't it a strange mixture of mollycoddling and exposing that's going on these days?
I think there is. I think society has certainly become a lot more risk averse and a lot more scared of itself. I can remember as a child of 9 being able to quite happily walk down to town from the estate where I lived and go shopping and come back again. My range was a couple of miles. I could go off on my bike and into the countryside and have a great time. And children do seem to be kept in more. But then we're letting them go on the internet, and
they're being exposed in that way. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to reverse the trend,
yes,
shut down the internet. 2, reduce school sizes to the maximum of 120 children per school. Stop selling children poisonous food and telling them not to eat it. Stop telling children that anything short of an A-star at GCSE is a failure. This one's a good one. Make maths an optional subject in high school. And instead, replace it with mandatory parenting, life skills, and money management classes. Equip them for adulthood. You know, I had a conversation in the pub with my mates after a game of darts, and I asked the question, how many of you in your adult life have ever needed to know pi?
Or sine, cos, and whatever the other one was. Yes.
and only one of them says, no, I use pi. I use pi every day. And I said, Steve, you're a maths teacher. Of course you do. So, well, you know, what are we gearing up children for? It's almost like the pinnacle of our education system is to create. What's his name? That physicist.
Brian Cox. Stephen
Brian
Hawkins.
Cox. Yeah, it's like it's all geared up to see how many professors we can create. But you know, we desperately need plumbers and electricians and business people and folk that can make stuff.
People who can work with their hands. Yes.
Exactly. You know, that's no. And it's almost seen as that's you do that if you don't succeed academically. And I think that's wrong. You know, it's like, and also we're teaching, we constantly, our culture, school culture is competitive. They're competing for exams. They're competing against other countries. Apparently, we're not doing as well as the Chinese. Hands up, anyone who cares about that. It's sort of, but adult life is all about cooperation, not competing. It's the degree to which we cooperate and share jobs out and help each other that matters, and seeing yourself as a vital part of the whole community. And again, that's because communities are too big and are too complicated. And I do think that a school is too big if the head teacher doesn't know the name of every child.
Yes.
Because children learn best when they're noticed and they feel part of a community. Again, it's about have a calm environment where youngsters are calm enough to learn stuff.
Yeah.
I know a lot of kids who said they would never talk to their children, their school teacher, about anything that was worrying them because their teacher is always too busy. And teachers in secondary schools come and go from classes, and so you know it's very easy to get very lost in those environments. These, we just the idea of the internet being free, and then suddenly it's filled with so much poisonous stuff. And then the adults, because I mean, I'm a certain age where I have to be told by young people how to use stuff, like this thing, today. Yeah, you are young people, and you told me how to use it. I now have a skill I didn't have. There'll come a point when
I'm not young people. I'm with you.
But there'll come a point when adults know more about it than kids do, and I think that's the right way around. Then it'll become a lot safer at that point. Yeah, but it's like, why do we fill the shops with sugar stuff and then tell children that it's their fault if they become obese?
Yes.
Yeah, you told them a highly addictive substance. Sugar is as addictive as heroin. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I'm ranting like an old man.
Yes. No, it's okay. It's good. It's all good stuff. When my kids were little, a girl used to come down from the house up the road from us, and she always emptied the fruit bowl She'd eat all the oranges and apples and bananas and everything. And her mum came down one day and said, "Gosh, I don't know how you manage that, because she doesn't like fruit in my house." And the next time I was up at that house, I noticed that there was a whole cupboard, floor to ceiling, full of sweeties and biscuits.
Well, there you go.
So that was the answer, which I didn't have in my house. Anyway, enough of that.
Okay. No, it's all
what's
part
available,
of the thing, isn't it? It's all part of the big thing. If you have young people turning up at school having had an energy drink on their way in, you've got someone wired up on more caffeine than I can consume, and sugar, and therefore then we expect them to settle down and
concentrate. Yes.
No, it's not fair on them, really. So this question of building resilience and vulnerability. We need to create safe environments around children. It's like Human Givens is based on the idea: if you meet someone's emotional needs, they become a resilient human being. You don't become resilient necessarily through adversity. You become resilient because life challenges you but doesn't overwhelm you, I think. And so children need challenges. It's like, how do you build a child's self-esteem? Well, you give them things to do and they see themselves succeeding at them. You can't inject them with it. And there's no point in because children know you're lying, really, if you say, "Oh, you're a great footballer, but you can hardly kick straight." He's thinking that that's not fair to say that. It's helping children find their own unique way of excelling, or even being good enough. I remember seeing a wonderful picture. I think it was of a skier coming down, and I love watching the ski Sunday shows. And there was a guy like crashing spectacularly. It was just a frozen photograph, and it said, "Once you've accepted that you're never going to be the world's best, you can enjoy being rubbish."
That's brilliant. That's lovely, isn't it?
So it's about, again, let's stop this kind of competitive that you've got to be a star, otherwise you're a failure. Just be good enough at stuff so you have a good life. Turning
slightly back towards the sexual abuse, well, completely, how can I teach my child about sexual abuse?
Right, depends on the age of the child, but I would love to recommend the NSPCC's PANTS program. Really, really, I'm very impressed with it. And Pantosaurus, you can watch his video online, and it starts kids off understanding the idea of privacy, private parts, not keeping secrets, saying no and it's okay, all those sort of things, without necessarily children having to have sexual knowledge. It's sort of, the child will know it's wrong because other ideas are in their heads about that. You mustn't do that to someone.
Is that something people can find by looking up the NSPCC website? And
you go online. It's a free resource. You can download posters about it, parent guides, everything. I know that my colleagues are working on something that's more geared towards adults, older children, because PANTS is very much for younger kids. And it is a fraught issue. I know that I think at the moment we've been asked by a couple of schools in the area to help out with the PHSE training for kids and healthy relationships, and that's where we're going now. What is actually a good relationship between boys and girls? So they've got something to compare it with.
Yes. So they know. So that's the PHSE. What's
personal health and social education? I think that's what there's probably called different things, different parts of the. It's the sort of things you do on the teacher training days.
Right.
I think it's a golden opportunity. I had a wonderful discussion with some 14-year-old boys about girls recently, and man, I saw some blushes. It was great. And
it's always good to get a boy blushing, isn't it?
Oh no! But then in the end, it was great because they were so confused about boys and girls and what boys like and what girls like, and even down to let's say you have a girlfriend and and you're sitting with her. What do you think her favourite subject is at that moment in time? And they'll go, "Yeah, well, I am." I go, "No, yeah, no, you certainly are not." So courtesy, respect, patience, listening to people, all those kind of core life skills, in a way, help kids to understand when to know when they're being coerced, and then it's not okay, and they can say no. Because if your yes is meaning, if your no is meaningless, then your yes is pointless. So they don't necessarily need to know the graphic details of stuff. In fact, I know that with stuff about child sexual exploitation, there have been some videos around which have been terrifying children, and the advice is now don't use them because it doesn't actually help anyone. It just makes them scared to go out of the house. Well, we don't want that. We want to empower youngsters, not terrify them.
Yeah, absolutely. Along the same sort of lines, how do you teach children the difference between discipline and abuse?
They would need to have consistent discipline from their own parents to begin with. There's expectations on behaviour. If you don't behave in a cooperative, pro-social way, there are consequences to that, and the punishment, if you like, or the sanction fits. Withdrawal of privilege is the most important one. Taking, beat me, but don't take my phone.
Yes. Yes. But I suppose if a child is behaving him or herself as per the house rules and is still being punished, then that is kind of abuse, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, again, we have this sort of idea that it's okay to hit a child, but if I went into the street and hit you could take me to court.
Yeah.
I could lose my job if I hit you, so why can I hit a little one who is even less likely to hit me back? Yeah. It's giving children all the wrong messages. It's teaching children because children learn by example. So I'm angry, I lash out at you. What am I teaching the child? I'm teaching the child that I can lash out if I'm angry. Absolutely. So every sanction is a lesson, because they're going to copy us when they get older. And I can't quote the source, but I know that someone who's done a meta-analysis of cultures where physical abuse is the norm, is that they tend to be more violent cultures anyway. So we're teaching children that violence is an option when frustrated. I think we need to be rethinking that altogether. And that's a public education thing. So I know in Scotland and in Wales now, smacking has now been banned.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting to see how that develops. I think we'll have a whole generation of children in about 30 years who'll be pontificating on the internet saying, I was never smacked when I was a child and it never did me any harm. Yeah.
Now, Chris, give or take a bit, we're kind of through the questions. As we agreed at the beginning, we sort of amalgamated quite a few. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, wow. Somebody asked, I'd like to ask Chris if you'd make his assessment tool.
Yeah, I'm coming. That's going to be my sort of finale question, but let's go for it. Yes.
There are actually, before I developed SOC, I developed something called IBA, which is called the Integrated Behavioural Analysis. And it was basically a mind map for people to use where you have a problematic behaviour and it invites you to think in 4 directions at the same time. In other words, the behavior will have a past, it will have a purpose, it will have a pattern, and there'll be a payoff to it. And you need to answer those 4 questions. And then it goes into areas where you may have to think. So it's a holistic diagnostic tool, if you like. It helps you find what's the here and now thing that's going on, because all behavior disappears if it isn't being fed. And then there was a way of and it was a tool for anyone to use, and we're trying to build that into other work that we're doing in training people to understand the impact that sexual abuse has. To stop thinking about the sexual abuse, start thinking about what it's left a kid with, and then that enables you then to start thinking, well, so what have we got to do to help? So it's a way to help groups think about their whole response. But single opportunity counselling does actually have an assessment tool at the beginning of it, of seeing skills and needs in one plane. And the second half of that question is, would there be a possibility of having Chris do a workshop as a CPD day for qualified HG therapists? Right, well, I'd absolutely love to, but at the moment, single opportunity counselling is very much fitting in with the Stoke-on-Trent, what's called the Together for Childhood strategy. And I'm in negotiations with folk in London about where SOC can then be, if you like, rolled out to other parts of the country. I mean, SOC is a product of HG, very much is a child of it. And I can't see any reason why I couldn't it is definitely a rabbit that's bouncing ahead of everyone, and we're going, quick, stop it, stop it, stop it.
And then it's breeding, as rabbits do.
Well, indeed it is. Which is
Yes.
ironic. One of the techniques is chase one rabbit.
Yes, I like.
If you
Well,
chase two rabbits, you won't catch either.
That's right. Chase one rabbit. Yes, I like that. I watched your. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the HG conference last year, but I watched the video of your talk afterwards.
Yeah.
So I liked all the rabbit stuff and the taxi and all sorts of good imagery there. Yes.
Well, that's the whole idea. We want things to stick in people's minds. But then saying to people, just because they're childlike doesn't mean they're trivial. And, we're getting a body of stories now from people working with it who found children who are very vulnerable coming for conversations, and the technique's working very well for the people and getting a good result back. So I'm buried in feedback sheets at the moment. And we've got an evaluations worker who's going to hopefully sort through all that. We're hopefully going to get someone who's doing their MA at the local university to properly evaluate it for us independently, which means going back to the people who've been using the techniques and the approach. And then finding out just quality of stories. Tell us your stories. How have you used it? In what ways it worked? Have some callback days, and ultimately talk to the children themselves if they're willing to. What was that conversation like? And get it straight from the kids themselves. Was it helpful?
Was it helpful? How did it change things for you?
Yeah, that's what we want. Because I don't want this to go out unless it really has a good, solid endorsement behind it. Because we all get very enthusiastic about our stuff, and you can get a bit rosy tinted about it and think, oh yeah, it'll be fine, yeah, everyone will love it, and then that's how most businesses fail, isn't it?
Yes. Hang on, let's go back and ask the customer. Yes, yeah. And
I think the other thing about it is, I don't think I mentioned this before, we didn't want it to be an internet thing, because I'm referring back to Idris Shah's stuff. The person who tastes knows. You have to taste it. You have to be in a room with people and talk and discuss and link it to your own personal experience, and then it becomes real. You can't learn judo watching a video on YouTube. Yeah. You think you can, but when somebody throws a punch at you, you haven't got a clue what to do. So you have to work with it. So the human transmission element is key to this. It's those of us who know how to do it are teaching those people out there in the community in such a way they can then use it, and there'll come a point when they can actually teach it, having done it.
Yeah.
And then
brilliant.
We'll maybe this could be, we can link up with HG, because I think it should be immediately obvious to HG practitioners how it works. We may make it something that HG could help NSPCC propagate.
That would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Chris. But first, I must say thanks to everyone who's listening, and to all those who took the time to submit those questions to Chris. And thank you to you, Chris, for answering them. It's been a really interesting conversation. And I'm sure the information and advice you've provided today will be helpful to all of us. So is there anything final you'd like to add, Chris?
No, I just wish everyone well. Keep on trucking.
Lovely. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chris.
In the end, we'll get there in the end.
We'll get there, wherever it is.
Wherever it is.
Thanks, Chris. Now, if you'd like to know more about the Human Givens approach to emotional health and clear thinking, we have loads of free resources and information on our Human Givens Institute website, which is hgi.org.uk. We do have a course called Understanding and Improving Children's Difficult Behaviour, which focuses on pre-11-year-olds. And the next one of those is on the 13th of March in London. But details of all our courses can be found at the Human Givens College website, which is www.humangivenscollege.com. And if you're interested in exploring our training options, we have them both online and attended training days, and they can all be found on that website. So we hope you've enjoyed this Ask the Expert podcast. Chris did say at the beginning he didn't want to be called an expert, but I think he's proved that he is an expert on all things children. So there. We've got a range of fantastic topics coming up being covered in these podcasts of ours. There's self-harm, which we touched on today, relationships, postnatal depression, body image, all sorts of things. So do listen up for those. And if you have a subject you'd like us to cover, please do get in touch, because this series is for you, all our listeners. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. All these podcasts will be shared on our social media accounts, so make sure you like or follow us. So thanks for listening, and we hope you have a good day. Bye for now.